Basically stuff that makes me want to throw myself off of things.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Basic AF, a mostly tech podcast. I am Tom Anderson, joined, as always, by my friend and co-host, Jeff Battersby. Hello, Jeff.
Anderson! Good to see you this morning, pal, on a Sunday.
You too, on a Sunday. Yeah, you remember those old commercials.
Yeah, of course I do. Because I'm freaking old myself.
Yeah, that makes both of us. So how are you, sir?
I'm good. We're, weathering the weather, which is in the Northeast, a little humid, a little hot, but not terrible. So
yeah, okay. We got through the heat dome there a couple of weeks ago.
It didn't last very long either.
No,
I thought it was supposed to be uglier than that, but it was only a couple of days.
Which was good. So now we're back here, just in regular summer mode.
Yes, right. Normal summer. I mowed the lawn without dying the other day, so that was good. And I'm sitting in Jeffrey Dahmer's basement, which is cool, as basements are. That's where the bodies are. So keeps them cool too, so I can enjoy a little brain food. Did I say that? Yeah, I might have said that. Weird.
All right, back on the rails here. This is episode 65. So show notes for this show can be found at basicafshow.com/65. And I was really trying to figure out a way to work in White Zombie's Thunderkiss 65 into this.
But you couldn't.
I really wanted to use the song, but I didn't want to get flagged for copyright violation.
At 30 seconds, you could do it.
Yeah, but you dance enough as it is. So.
Fair use. I do.
Yeah. So.
With or without music.
Right. So again, show notes, basicafshow.com/65. So we are in the midst of summer, as we were just talking about, and the living is easy, as they say.
I could start singing right now if you want to.
No, that's so we thought for this episode, what we would do is kind of take a relaxed approach to it, chill vibes, as the kids are saying these days.
I guess they are,
and kind of just talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing over the summer, leisure, entertainment, somewhat tech-related, those types of things. We're going to sprinkle in a little bit of everything. So, Jeff, why don't we kick it off with maybe some things we're reading this summer? I know you're an avid book reader, so why don't you start us off?
Oh, sure. You're first in the list, but I have to go first. I get it. Yes. All right. Summer reading. So I read a ton. I read a lot of nonfiction and fiction, but most of the nonfiction I read is related to, The Atlantic, the New York Times, the Washington Post, basically stuff that makes me want to throw myself off of things.
Yeah, you should stop doing that.
Yeah, I probably should. But I have a couple books. I'm usually reading a couple things at a time anyway, but I typically have one book that I'm reading straight through, and then I have others that I graze, depending on what the mood is. And right now I'm reading an older novel by Don DeLillo called White Noise. My friends, Mary Holland and Jeffrey Fisher. Mary was my college thesis advisor, my master's thesis advisor, and we have remained friends. That's the benefit, by the way, of going to college when you're ancient, is that you're older than the professors are, and you can become friendly with them. So that is what I've done. But they the other day when we were chatting back and forth, Jeff said something about White Noise, the novel White Noise by Don DeLillo. I said, I've never read that. And then they both shamed me nicely. They both shamed me for not reading it. So I sent a text message to my friend who owns a used bookstore in town and picked up a copy of White Noise. And damn, if this isn't a good book. It won't give away too many of the details because mostly not quite to the middle of it. I'm about 110 pages in. But what's really interesting, this was written in 1984, middle of Reagan era. And the biggest feature of this, the middle section of this book, is something called Airborne Toxic Event. But it's about this college professor who, interestingly enough, has created a Hitler studies program, which is kind of wild. And his son is named Heinrich. So you know, it's got some odd details going on about it. But what happens is a train gets popped open near their college town and releases a deadly gas into the air. So, unfortunately, too prescient about things that have gone on recently. Like I think it was in Ohio a couple of years back. You know,
Right.
big train. So it's written in '84, and I don't recall anything like that happening around that time. But what it's talking about now is quite interesting, quite good, really brilliantly written. Really enjoy the book. So I would highly recommend that as reading material. So, and then I have two other books on my list that I will be reading is, you know, part of my summer reading program. So when I go back to first grade next year, I have a couple books under my belt and can write about them.
You get that free personal pan pizza at Pizza Hut.
Yeah, right.
Program.
Right. That's exactly it. I'm going to be reading a book called Crudo by Olivia Lang. That book was recommended to me by a friend of my sister's, actually. And she sent me a text message probably 3-4 months ago and said, "I just finished this. You must read this." So have that on my list. Haven't started yet. Don't really know what it's about, but looking forward to reading it. And then another book called Wellness, and that's by a guy named Nathan Hill, and that's another one that Mary Holland recommended to me after she read it. So those are the big three, and then there is a fourth. It's a collection of short stories by a guy named Ken Liu, and this is one that I'll pick up in between, like if I don't feel like reading big novel, just want to read, you know, a couple of short stories. The Hidden Girl and Other Stories by Ken Liu, which will lead into something else that I'll talk about in a few minutes, but collection of short stories that are really tech related, some of it AI related, some of it, science fiction in that sense. So kind of in my sweet spot. So those are 4 books that I'm working on next to the 500 that are stacked up behind my desk. I joke that fortunately my kids like to read, but when I die, they're going to have to read the books that I didn't finish because I have a lot of books. It's maybe like disease.
Do you want this one? No. You want that one? No. Just get rid of all this stuff.
Yeah, right. Dad.
Yeah.
How about you? What's on your reading list?
So reading list typically for me is fairly light. But of late, I have been enjoying a couple of newsletters that I get, email newsletters that I receive. Sahil Bloom's Curiosity Chronicles newsletter. He has just put out a book recently, The 5 Types of Wealth, that is on my list of books to read that I've not gotten to. I did listen to an episode of the Bookworm podcast the Bookworm podcast, the hosts read a book and then discuss it on the podcast. And they do that every 2 weeks. So they do a ton of reading. Yeah, it's impressive, the dedication to it. And it's been running for a while. They've switched up hosts a little bit, but we'll put a link to that show. So they talked about the book, which I thought was interesting. And so I've subscribed to his newsletter. And there's a lot of mindset type things that he talks about, just, perspectives and, healthy ways to look at challenges maybe that you're having or running into, or just mindset towards the day. Like, well, we were sharing some stories before we started recording today of some things that, in our personal lives can be a little bit frustrating, right? We were talking about those, and I've mentioned on this show before where I've put a lot of time and work into mindset stuff, because growing up it wasn't intentional, but there were just things that were kind of programmed into us as kids because of the way, your parents come up, they pass it on, the good and the bad. And again, not that it was intentional to cause harm in any way. I don't want to put it in that light. There's no victimhood here or anything like that, but it's just
playing the victim.
Always playing the victim. But, we grew up fairly poor. right? So it was, some of that mindset, the limiting beliefs and doubt and, lack of confidence and those types of things. And so I've done a lot of work on that, but I continue to kind of reinforce those things to help me through that. So his newsletter's been good. James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, he's got newsletter 321, which I have been enjoying. His is very short, easy to digest. What I like about that is he puts 3 ideas from him in it, includes 2 quotes from others, and then has kind of a self-reflection question at the end. So those are both good. Book-wise, I've been working on Will Guidara, might be not pronouncing that right. Sorry about that, Will. Unreasonable.
We know you're listening, by the way. Will.
He is. He sent me a signed copy of the book. I'm kidding. Unreasonable Hospitality. I saw some folks that I follow on Instagram recommended that, and Will kind of came of age in the restaurant business. And his hospitality book, it's somewhat of a business book, but it's also a, how to treat people book.
Gotcha. That title's intriguing. What does that mean?
So the premise of the book is serving others, and how to do that at a high level. And so
interesting. He
sprinkles stories from his time in the restaurant business, throughout of, simple little things. Like he told a story of where there was a couple at the restaurant at dinner, it's a high-end restaurant in New York City, and they realized, oh no, we left something in the freezer at home. And I'm going to assume they'd been to the restaurant several times before and they were comfortable enough to do this. But one of the employees at the restaurant was like, hey, I guess they'd become friends. He's like, hey, enjoy your dinner. I'd be happy to run back to your place, take care of that for you. And so he did. But when he went, he actually left a little surprise from the restaurant on the counter at the house when they got there. So it's kind of, taking those extra little steps to, go out of your way to be nice to people, to serve people. And again, take the focus off of yourself and put it on to others. So working through that one. Pat Flynn has a new book, Lean Learning. I like Pat's content. He does a lot of YouTube stuff, podcasts. His Superfans book is great. Highly recommend that one. Read that one years ago. It shows up in my Readwise highlights a lot. And then 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman is another one that I've heard a lot of good things about. It's like time management for mortals. It's like, you're only here for a certain amount of time. So what do you want to focus on? Don't waste it on stupid stuff. And then the one that's
4,000 people just turned off this podcast, but go ahead.
We have that many. Nice. That's great. And then the last one has a funny title, but How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler, which is an old book from the 40s, the 1940s. But I've heard some people talk about that, and it's just kind of ways to approach reading a book that sounded interesting. So I want to look at that. Don't know I'll read it cover to cover. I may skim through that one, but we'll see.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
You have something in the notes that I'm going to have you extrapolate on a little bit. You said Readwise Daily Highlights Review, and you sent me some kind of interesting stuff of how you were integrating Readwise with Claude to kind of pull more detail out. You just want to say something about that briefly?
Yeah, so we talked a few shows ago about Readwise a little bit, and that was the episode where we talked about my subscription to the Snipped podcast app. And so this ties in.
Snipped.
Right. And so this plays into that a bit. So, Readwise is a service for those that are not familiar with it, where you can take tidbits of information from various types of media or content and highlight it and save it into this database of information. So this kind of this knowledge base of sorts. You can do it with books, ties into Kindle, ties into Apple Books, a whole bunch of other players or readers. Sorry about that. Of course, the podcast app allows you, Snip lets you listen to a podcast, something interesting you hear, you tap a button, it grabs that in audio format, uses some AI stuff to give you a summary, but also provides the transcript around it as well. So you keep that context. You can do it with PDFs, YouTube videos, all sorts of stuff. And so over time, your Readwise becomes packed full of different things. And Some of them, you go back and you look at and you're like, why did I ever do that? Some of them, you're like, this is really great. And so what they've done, because, it doesn't take long to add a lot into your Readwise system. And so what you can do in Readwise is you can set up these reviews where it will email you on a frequency. So it could be daily, weekly, every 3 days, every 5 days. But it sends you highlights of the things that you've added to it. And so that's one way that you can kind of use that information. Now, I look at those. I don't look at it every day when it comes in, but I look at it probably 4 to 5 times out of the week. And it has been helpful because I favorited some, I've gotten rid of some. But with the Claude piece of it, using the model context protocol, which basically is a standard where you can tie Claude or any AI tool that adopts this protocol into other data sources. And so you set up the Claude desktop app. Readwise supports MCP, and so there's an access token you have to put into a config file. It was stupid simple to set up. It sounds like it's not, but it is really
just
simple.
Glazed over, by the way.
It's basically they give you the file, like the file is in Claude, and you just paste the information in, and you're done. But then after that point, you can chat in Claude and have it reference your highlights in Readwise. And so what I've been trying to do is to see if there's a benefit of doing that in Claude versus just using the native chat in Readwise. And honestly, so far, I like the Readwise chat better because it provides the sources at the bottom of it. So you can click the source, and then in a sidebar, it'll show you the context and the exact transcript and everything. So it's a little more useful. But if you're doing already a bunch of your work in, say, Claude, it is kind of nice to have access to those. Downside is it's only on the desktop app. So if you're doing it on the phone or iPad, you don't have that access yet. Yeah. Which may be coming down the road. But so I've been playing around with that just a couple of days. So I'm not sure where that's going to end up.
All right. Very cool. Like it. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. I thought it was interesting what you sent me, how you had asked some very specific questions about your Readwise content that was very specific as well, and what it pulled out for you. So that was great.
Yeah, and the concept there is if I've got all of this information, and some of it's about writing, and some of it's about landing pages for websites and things like that. And so it's a nice way to say, okay, here's what I've put together. It's myself validated against kind of these best practices that I've collected in my highlights, and show me like where have I come up short, what looks good. So it's like a nice little reference tool.
Dig it. All right. On from books.
Yes.
So talk about lounging on the couch, watching things. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what you're watching, Tom?
So I've been watching mostly YouTube.
Shocking.
Yeah, so we've talked about this. I don't really watch anything on the streaming services. I will watch some NFL games in the fall, and that's about it. So of late, though, so I've been trying to put together some better systems for like the content creation that we're doing. So for this podcast and for my newsletter and maybe some other things, and so. There is a YouTube channel by Vanessa Lau that I have watched. She's done a ton of videos. She's got close to 1 million subscribers. But there's been 5 or 6 that I've watched of late where she has really gone into the processes and systems that she's using to create and manage content. Really interesting the way that she does it. She's doing it obviously at a very high level with that big of a YouTube channel. So I nerd out on those and just try to take little tidbits of information. Like here's, she talks about how she comes up with, here's how I generate 30 content ideas in 5 minutes and, all these sorts of things. So those have been very good. And then I've just been watching some different AI videos, like training videos, just to kind of keep tabs on all that stuff.
All right. Very cool. You're going to notice a theme here because you're very nonfiction. I'm very fiction.
Right. Which is good. You get both sides on this show.
Yeah. We get it. Right. We are the...
Just let that go.
Tom
I
and
can
I
see
are
where
very,
you were heading. Just let it go.
Yeah, okay, I'm biting my tongue. Tom and I are very yin and yang when it comes to that. So my watch list is going to be way more fiction related, which I will say, as I've said a few times, I'm a writer. I watch a lot of things not only to be entertained or to enjoy good art or whatever it is that I'm doing, but also to kind of pay attention to how stories are being told, and so that I can kind of integrate that into myself. So it's not intentionally a way that I am learning things, but I definitely am learning things by paying attention to, and in some cases going, this writing is hideous, or they gave too much away, like paying attention to what's going on, which are things that I do if I'm reading a novel as well. But I am watching presently two things, and then I will be, I have just finished watching something else. The first thing is a series on Netflix called Pantheon. And this is going to tie back to that collection of short stories that I talked about before, The Hidden Girl and Other Stories by Ken Liu. Pantheon is a animated series, that is based on short stories in that book by Ken Liu. And the premise of this show, which I highly, highly recommend, is that we're at a place where there's AI, yes, but what they refer to as UI. And what UI is instead of artificial intelligence, which we know what AI is, it's uploaded intelligence. And so what has happened is, and unfortunately, in order to upload your intelligence, it can't just, plug you into a bunch of electrodes and suck the information into the computer. They actually have to read every layer of your brain, which means essentially you have to open your skull up and fry your brain to put it into this uploaded intelligence space, into these computer systems. There's a lot of political intrigue in this, and a lot of interesting talk about, if you've ever gone to church, which I know you have, Tom, I spent years and years in church, this whole idea that you're going to live on eternally. And that's kind of part of what this is. It's this drive, and we have guys like Peter Thiel and others who are thinking about this stuff legitimately in the real world, where you're uploading yourself to some cloud and that you live on in this particular cloud. And there are ramifications because these people have a lot of power and they can make their way into other systems and screw around with that. But there's also this problem of disembodiment, and you leave this mortal coil and you leave behind people, but you have the ability to communicate with them, but you're not there physically to interact with. So it really, really interesting ideas, challenging ideas. Highly, highly recommend it. Second on my list, and I'm going to be doing a rewatch of this. I just finished watching Sinners by Ryan Coogler. So movie that was in movie theaters. And I will say there's one part in the middle of this movie that if you watch nothing else, and you should watch the whole movie, you should watch this. It's a musical montage that kind of shows this linking between a variety of different styles of music, everything from current hip hop to jazz to Native American music. Like it's in the way it's woven together is absolutely brilliant. Probably one of the best pieces of it's best segments of a film that I've ever seen ever. Like moving, powerful, really interesting. The way it's shot was brilliant too. And by the way, it's what they call in the series. They shot it as a oneer, which means basically a single camera. They did have a couple of cameras because of what they're doing, but the whole scene, they had to go from beginning to end while they were shooting. It's brilliant piece of work. So I'm going to be rewatching that. And I just, which I highly recommend. You should watch Sinners, and maybe watch Get Out next to it. And then finally, I just finished Andor, second season of Andor. And man, a lot of the Star Wars stuff that Disney's been doing is janky and wouldn't waste my time with. The 2 seasons that we've had of Andor so far are frigging brilliant. Like some really great writing. The people that are writing it are some of my favorite film and TV writers. And it cannot recommend that series enough. In fact, I'll probably go back at some point in time and rewatch it from beginning to end just to kind of build myself up. So those are the things I'm on right now. And then, usually I have other stuff going on that I'm paying attention to in a sideways fashion. If I'm doing some work, I'll throw a show on. I like to listen to the dialogue in these things as much as watch what's going on. So I'll pay attention in that way. But those are the 3 things that I'm on to right now. Thank you.
And I like how that serves multiple purposes for you as well. So it's entertainment, but it's also a lot of research and studying and things like that.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. It really is. I'm paying attention to things. It's not necessarily, I'm not sitting down and taking notes. It's not that kind of thing. It's more an integrative kind of thing where I'm, watching and kind of learning as I watch. If it worked for Tarantino, it could work for me, right?
Yeah, it could.
Yeah, could. Probably not kind of in that way, but all right.
Well, what's next?
Tom.
Yep.
We do a podcast and we listen to podcasts, don't we?
We do.
And a bunch of other stuff as well. So why don't you tell us what you've been listening to and why?
All right. So I have been, and again, I don't get to listen to podcasts as frequently as I used to. When I was commuting more, I tend to listen to podcasts only in the car. I've tried doing it at work, having them in the background, and I'm either focusing on work and I'm not hearing what the podcast is talking about, or I'm listening to the podcast and not doing any work. So
that sounds great. That part.
Which, not a bad gig if you can get it. And so I don't get to listen as much. I probably get 15 minutes a day because I listen going into work. I don't listen to anything coming home from work because I use that time to just kind of decompress, have some, just me and the hum of the tires.
In the road.
In the road noise. Right. But one that I've started listening to of recent that I didn't really up until probably 3-4 months ago. Chris Williamson does a show, Modern Wisdom, which is apparently a massive show, big audience. He's got close to 2 million followers on social and stuff. And I'm like, I never heard of that, but
interesting.
And so,
2 million. That'd be nice.
And so my manager at work, he sent me one to listen to. And so I kind of pick and choose because he publishes a lot of content. I mean, he does 2 to 3 a week. And some of these are, most of them, an hour and 20, but some of them stretch into 3-4 hours. And it would take me like 2 months to listen to a 4-hour podcast, 15 minutes clip. So that's where that podcast app Snip comes into play sometimes too. But they're interesting conversations. Not all of them appeal to me, but some of the ones that I've listened to that I liked. He had financial guy Dave Ramsey was the first one that I listened to, and he can be a little polarizing depending on some of your belief systems and things like that. I've been a fan of his for a while, but it was good conversation around money and financial planning and why people do certain things. And so that kind of started with that, but that kicked me down the road into some other ones. So he had Will Storr on, who did, Masterclass in Storytelling was the title of that episode. Found it very interesting. I probably did like 50 snips out of that show.
I think you should send me that one.
Okay. I'll do that. There was one, and this is the show that tipped me into trying the stress complication on the watch that we talked about last episode. So Martha Beck was on to talk. Her show title was How to Break Free from Chronic Anxiety. And I just thought it was interesting. I don't consider that I have that. I've never been diagnosed. Maybe I do. I have no idea. But just listening to that gave me some ideas of things to try. So that one was interesting to me. Matt Abrams was on for The Secret to Becoming a Confident Speaker was the title of that one. And again, these are just conversations that they have. They sit down, they talk, for 90 minutes, give or take. So interesting. Again, not every single one do I listen to. It's just way too much stuff. And then another one that I've been enjoying is one that Beehive, the newsletter company or publishing platform, publishes, called the Creator Spotlight podcast, where they bring somebody in who's doing a newsletter of some sort or a podcast or YouTube, and they kind of break down how they've approached it, the different things they've tried, all that sort of stuff, which has been interesting. And then music-wise, Apple Music, if you subscribe to that, for a while now, probably 9 years or more, they've had the replays at the end of the year. So it's your top songs that you've listened to through the year. They've got one now that is your replay all-time list. So it's everything that's new. And so I've been tinkering around with that, which not surprisingly sounds like the replays. So, yeah, that's not very intriguing.
Yeah, I played with that too. That popped up in my in Apple Music the other day, and it's kind of cool. It's at least nice to see. Yes, you're correct. It's not that much different than what your replay 2024 was.
Yeah,
but
they just put out. I don't know if you saw this one yet, Jeff, or not. The top streamed songs of all time on Apple Music. It's like the 500 top streams. I think that just came out this week, and that reminded me back in the old days when I worked at that tiny little radio station. Memorial Day weekend was the Listener 500. So it was the top 500 rock songs of all time. And the top 10 never changed. We maybe moved one from 9 to 7 or something like that. But so maybe think of that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's nice. If you haven't checked that out and you are an Apple Music user, we highly recommend that you do that, because Apple actually pays people. Spotify doesn't pay very much. I know we're on Spotify, Tom. But it definitely is worthwhile to have a look at your Apple Music replay all time. I enjoyed listening to it, and I personally put together a couple times a year, a couple playlists. My son, Colin, actually does very regular playlists that, we're buddies on Apple Music. And so I see what he's doing, and I discover a lot of music through him, but I also am inclined to do the same thing, just not as often. And so I have some good stuff there. So I like that. Good stuff. For me, one of my favorite podcasts that I've been listening to for a while now is Throughline from NPR. And Throughline, interesting. It comes out, I think it's about every week, and then they take about a 3 or 4 month break. A total of 3 or 4 month breaks was they start to put together other shows. But Throughline takes some type of current issue that we're seeing, something that's going on either politically or something that's going on socially or otherwise, and then contextualizes it through history. So you'll get some, say, current vote that's taken place in the House of Representatives, but you'll see kind of historically how those things have gone on. In some cases, as far back as the 1600s, and working their way through. So he usually goes in 3 sections, and it's always enlightening to understand the context of how, we typically are stuck in this current moment and seeing the current moment in the, hopefully in the context of our lives and our education. But this recontextualizes some of that stuff on a much broader scale. So the things that, for me, born in the 60s, seeing, stuff from, say, talk about civil rights, for me, that was when I was a little kid and those things were taking place. Mm-hmm. But you can see the much broader context of where these things began. So really, really interesting. And that's where the through line idea comes through, is that the thing that you see in the present may feel very much like it is the present, but there are absolutely other things that have led to this. And it's trying to help you find not necessarily the beginning point, but a beginning point that you can then use to contextualize whatever the current situation is. So highly recommend that. I've mentioned this podcast before because it is also one of my favorites. It's called Scene on Radio, SCENE on Radio. And I'm re-listening to one called Seeing White, which is one of the earlier seasons. And I know we don't talk politics on the show, Tom, but it really is kind of looking at ideas of whiteness and how they were kind of created and used to push agendas as opposed to it being an actual thing. You know, everybody knows that DNA across, you know, whatever quote unquote race you might be a part of, you know, off by 0.2% or something like that. The difference, you know, so it's really brilliant in how it's done. Every single season of this show, I will say, is like a college class. Like, that's how detailed each one of these episodes are. And I find it very, very intriguing. I've gone back and listened to a number of these series. And this is probably something, if I was going to pay for Snipped, I would use Snipped. In fact, I tested Snipped with Seeing White, which is how I got back on Seeing White. I thought, let me listen to that using Snipped and see what it was like. And it really, really brilliant. Musically, the band The Mars Volta just came out with a new album, just came out, I think, in the last week. I'm not going to be able to pronounce this. Lucio Sucho, Los Ojos de Vacho. Yeah, good luck.
Good job.
My Spanish is okay. But the title of the album is Filthy Lucre, The Eyes of the Void. These guys, in terms of how they write their music, the complexity of it moves me. Just say that. Truly moves me. There's something about this album and the last album, whose name evades me at the moment, but the last album that I really like, and I would highly recommend this. And then Arcade Fire, who's probably more well known to a lot of people, just came out with an album called Pink Elephant. So those are two that I'm kind of listening to on repeat. Really, really like it. So there you go.
I like that you're still an album listener, like not physical vinyl necessarily, but just start on track one and let it play.
I do, and it's
I can't do.
No. You're one of those guys that there's only one good song on the album, and so I'm not going to buy the album.
I still have those scars on my bank account from when you buy the CD for $19 or the album, the vinyl way back in the day, or cassettes, and you'd be like, well, these two songs are good. It's the rest of this crap.
I think there are a lot of artists still, and this is the thing that I grew up with, that there is going back to a podcast title, a through line in some albums for some artists.
Mm-hmm,
you know, it's you know, the way the album is designed, the way one song segues into another song. You know, there's a lot of thought, and Arcade Fire, the Mars Volta, these are guys that, and I'll say also the National, Spoon, like there are a couple of bands that I listen to that their albums really are designed that way. Like, it's not just here's
back
songs.
In the day we called those concept albums. Remember that? And you'd be like,
yeah,
you put it on, you listen to it start to finish. It's a concept album. It's a story, the whole thing. They're not tracks.
Yeah, no.
You're putting us down by calling them singles. We don't do singles. It's a concept album.
Yeah, and there are still some albums that I don't listen to.
There were some of those for sure. Yeah. And I think, too, some of that goes back to me for the attention span stuff. It's like, because a lot of albums...
Sorry, I stopped paying attention to
I know, you're good at that. So did a lot of people about 20 minutes ago, and I was going off on the MCP stuff for Claude. But hopefully you're still here. But, but yeah, it's like, I just like, you know, things to jump around different style genres. Like, my playlists are masses. Like, you think they're themed out. No, not really. And there's all sorts of different styles and genres and techniques. And people are like, man, my wife is like, you listen to some weird stuff. Like, yeah. Like, well, yeah, I guess.
Because I'm weird.
100%. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
And now we're going to talk about things we are playing, as Jeff coughs there.
Playing. Right.
See, we've moved up our production values. He's actually turning off his mic.
Turn on the mute button so you didn't hear me hack up along.
So, what are any games you're into right now? I know
All right.
the new Switch just came out, so that's been a thing. I know you have a Switch, so I don't think
I have
you
a
bought the new
Switch.
Switch. But.
So, true confession, and as I mentioned, my uncle died a couple months ago, and my desire to play anything, I don't think it's not something that I noticed in the moment. I think it's just something that I'm coming to realize that it's I haven't played much. I haven't used the Switch much. I haven't played any other games really until probably this last week. And there are a couple, one in particular that I picked up, and it's on Apple Arcade. It's called Lost in Play, and it's kind of a puzzle game. Really kind of hard to explain, but it's very therapeutic for me. It's that kind of game. It's really sweet. There are gnomes and magical areas and things of that nature. It's a kind of a side scroller, where you're going from left to right and you're, leaping over frogs and doing all sorts of weird stuff like that. But it's soft, and I think has eased me out of some of the sadness I'm feeling about my uncle, who was and is very special to me. This is probably, other than grandparents, this is the first really big loss that I've experienced, and I'm grateful for that, but I'm also sad about it. So this has kind of started to ease me, into feeling kind of normal again. So, really,
it's funny you mentioned that. I was thinking earlier today. So, July 4th is my grandmother's birthday, and so growing up.
Wait! My grandmother's birthday is also July 4th.
Really?
That's wild. Let's talk about this on the
cool.
side,
yeah.
But that's really crazy. All right, go ahead. I didn't need to interrupt.
And so you may relate to this somewhat then. So our July 4th celebrations were always, it's grandma's birthday party and it's cookout for the 4th and fireworks and all that kind of stuff. And she passed away in 2007. She was born in 1917 and she had 15, she was one of 15 kids, which, yeah. And
kudos to her mom.
Yeah. And, they lived in a tiny little house. Somehow they made 5 bedrooms in the top floor of this house, but it was tiny. But anyway, the shorter part of the story is yesterday we had our family get together for the 4th, and her sister, who is still living, she came. And she's come to the last couple. And she's one of the youngest of the kids. So like my grandmother would have been 108 yesterday. So she was 89 when she passed away. But just having her there, man, it was such it's like I see her a couple times a year, but every time I see her, it's such a beautiful, sweet, just to hear her voice and how it brings all of that whole clan back, because, we all grew up just down the street and like the siblings were always close. And it was just really great. And so what I was thinking about that was, man, it's like, there's only 2 of them left. She has another sister that's alive as well. But you mentioned there, what made me think about that is you'd mentioned, you're both grateful and sad about your uncle's passing being so significant. And I was thinking the same thing, because we've been very fortunate in that regard too, where we've had grandparents pass, but parents are still around. So, but anyway, don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's important to talk about though. And interestingly, my grandmother would have been 109 this year, so very close in age. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it is.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
and on
cool
the same day. Look at what we just learned about each other, Tom. We opened up, and here
we've been friends for how many years now? 15.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Give or take. Yeah,
nuts. So anyway,
yes,
always learning something new. Awesome. What else?
So I've been playing around with the Vision Pro a little bit more. No particular reason why. I just see it sitting there, and I say, well, I'll check that out.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and I found for some of the writing stuff that I do, if I want to like kind of just have 20 or 30 minutes of really focused time, I'll get the MacBook out. I'll go into the Mac Virtual Display, set a nice one of the scenes, so like in Mount Hood or whatever it is, and just kind of block everything out, get some decent music going, and then I work for 30 or 40 minutes, and then it gets uncomfortable, and I take it off. And then we already talked about the Readwise stuff, so we won't get into that anymore. And then thinking about the idea of maybe putting some stuff on YouTube here in the next 6 months or so.
Awesome.
Some of the newsletter stuff that I do, I'm like, God, this would just be so much easier if I just did a video and showed people what I was talking about. So that's kind of leading.
Something to be said for that.
See. Yeah.
Awesome. Last two things for me, playing with the new camera that I got and continue to do that. Been a little busy the last couple of weeks, so I haven't been able to pull it out every day like I was trying to do, but that is my intent. And then we are going, actually, my youngest daughter and I are both headed to California. And we're going to, celebrate my uncle, as I said, but we're also going to just have family time at the place that we used to go as kids. And so she's going to be coming with me there. And one of the other things, I just texted my sister-in-law, and she is an artist, a very good artist. And I texted her to see, she usually, like when we're sitting on the beach at the lake, she's doing watercolor painting and things like that. So I've never been really good at doing any art like that. Drawing's never been my strong suit. And so I texted her and said, hey, would you be willing to let me sit with you? And, maybe you can give me a couple little informal lessons on how to do watercolor and how to sketch some stuff. So I'm going to give that a go while I'm away and just kind of see what flows.
See how it goes. Yeah,
exactly right.
Yeah, give it a shot.
All right. Tell me, we've done it. 45 minutes ish. And to everyone that's still around after Tom's thesis on Claude and make it all work, which I asked for. I did ask for that.
You started it.
Yeah, my fault. I can take the blame.
Okay.
We're really grateful that you've come along for this. This is the mostly tech portion of this show, and these are the fun things for us. I think it's seeing what we're listening to, doing, talking about, thinking about. It's important for Tom and me, and so we hope it's important for you too, and maybe you'll take something away from this. So thanks for coming along.
Yep. If you've got any suggestions, things you're reading, watching, listening to, feedback at basicafshow.com. We're always open for new ideas.
Absolutely.
Expand. And then I think, let's see, so this show will publish on July 7th, so the following would be the 21st. We'll probably be right in the public betas by that point. So
hope so.
I'm going to install, at least on the iPad, that one. I might do the Vision Pro one as well. So maybe we'll have some discussions on that, but we'll see when those hit.
Sounds good. All right, Tom.
Take us home, Jeff.
All righty. As Tom said, feedback at basicafshow.com. If you go to the show notes, you can also link to us, leave us a little message through that. As always, Psychokinetics provides our show music, Celsius 7, and we're very grateful to them for letting us have that little beat at the beginning and end of our show, and Randall Martin Design for artwork. And we highly recommend that you check Randall out. That's us, Tommy.
That's it. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We appreciate it, and we will talk to you again in a couple of weeks. Have a great rest of your day or night.
See ya.